have to always be ready for surprises because there's a possibility that in the United States, Donald Trump, his administration is going to introduce a dual currency system, meaning that there's going to be a dollar for foreign trade and there's going to be a dollar for domestic use. And then that means that it's basically the Chinese model. And it makes a lot of sense because by using the dual currency system, China has been able to insulate itself from external shocks. So the last 40 years, China has not had, maybe longer than 40 years, I don't know. But China, in my memory, has never had a financial crisis, whereas we in the West have a financial crisis every few years.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host Lucian, most of you know me as Triangle Investor for social media. My returning guest today is Alex Krainer. I believe no further introduction is needed. Alex, thank you for coming on. Welcome back.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lucian, and greetings to all your viewers and listeners.
Thanks, Alex. There are a lot of topics to cover. You were in my show a little over a month ago, and the world has managed to become more unsafe in the meantime. Let's start with your geopolitical analysis between the US and Europe, especially in the light of the recent decisions, developments, and messages coming from both sides. How are you viewing that, and what next moves do you expect from both sides?
Well, how much time do we have?
We have a lot of time. Take your time. You can answer as long as you want.
Well, we are clearly going into uncharted territories because the post World War II order, as we all know it, in which we all grew up and learned our ways, is now obsolete. It is going to be replaced by something else that we are not yet quite sure what it's going to be exactly. But we know that the current order of things is unsustainable. The thing that is very, very encouraging and very positive as a development is that the United States administration under Trump is now talking to their Russian counterparts. In 2019, the then German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel said that the bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia is far and away the most important one for the future of world peace. And the fact that it has been completely abandoned for nearly 3 years under the Biden administration has put us all on the precipice of World War III or IV. I don't know what the right number should be, but on the precipice of a world war between two nuclear superpowers that could end up annihilating civilization and life on Earth. So the fact that Trump and Putin are speaking, that their delegations are meeting and discussing the problem matters of the day, is hugely encouraging. Now, the events going on in the Middle East are complicated, and I don't feel quite as optimistic about that area, but we'll find out. And in the meantime, we see that Europe has somehow fallen through the cracks, abandoned by its master, and is in search for its own position, identity, future. They don't quite know what to do, so they are simply persisting in the direction that they have chosen, which is the direction of confrontation, militarization, and ultimately wars in the future. The third time in a little over a century. It's very telling if you observe the developments that now that the United States has, let's say, started to disengage from Project Ukraine, that European nations are not following, because up until now we were always led to believe that Oh, it's the Americans, the American Empire. They're always leading us into these military misadventures everywhere around the world, and we are just following along because, we are being loyal allies, and we hope for the best, and we hope to moderate things, or safeguard human rights and things like this. But now we see that as America changes direction, the Europeans are staying uh, on the same agenda, especially Great Britain. And so Great Britain now is becoming revealed as actually the main instigator of all these conflicts. And then we don't know exactly how far back that goes, because up until now, the United States has been unquestionably on board with all those things and even appeared as the leader of all those things. And the British themselves never hesitated to reinforce that impression that, oh, it's the special relationship, we're just being a loyal ally to the United States. Now we see that the situation is quite different, but the actual source of power of the United Kingdom and the means and methods that they use to manage world events is a bit of a mystery. For example, we see that they have recently signed in our own neighborhood, Croatia, right? In Bosnia and Herzegovina, they signed a military cooperation agreement. And we know that Britain has similar military cooperation agreements with France, with Sweden, with Poland, with Ukraine, possibly with Turkey. And, if Great Britain was this military superpower, you would understand that. But it isn't. It's a shadow of its former self. Its whole military counts about 70,000 troops. Their navy is next to non-existent. All they have is some nuclear missiles. That's about it. They have Storm Shadows missiles, but nothing of strategically decisive nature. So, why are all these countries signing military cooperation agreements with Britain? Bosnia and Herzegovina, had they signed military cooperation agreement with a fellow Muslim country like Turkey or even Albania, that would make sense. With Croatia, its neighbor, that would make sense. But Great Britain, that needs to be explained. So it isn't about British military power, so what is it? It seems that the British still somehow have predominant control over the global financial flows. And so I think that they are able to incentivize all these governments into cooperating with them. And by cooperating, I mean basically doing their bidding in the region. And then we find out about the consequences down the road, because we see now that the Balkans are being kind of rigged for demolition. Like the destabilization is being implemented in various ways. I don't know. I don't quite understand. I tried to understand what the demonstrations in Belgrade are. I watched many podcasts from local journalists there, and so I know a lot of information. I don't quite understand the pattern behind the events, and whether this is a globalist attack on Vučić government, whether this is a genuine people's uprising. It's not clear. To me, at least, it isn't. But we see that there's destabilization there. We see that Bosnia-Herzegovina itself is being torn apart. There's conflict between Srpska and Sarajevo. The Balkans have been a powder keg for over a century, and it has been relatively easy to destabilize it and to cause friction, to start another war that could be destabilizing to the whole region. So I think that the whole of Europe is now at risk of these kinds of events. We've seen the process of deindustrialization go. Then came in the process of now allocating hundreds of billions of euros, trillions of euros potentially to defense spending and militarization. It's a very, very eerily reminiscent of what we've experienced in the 1930s on the European continent. You know, first the capital started moving from, let's say, the mid 1920s in Germany, the Dawes plan, and then the Young plan, which was all mobilizing massive financial resources to militarize Germany, obviously with the long-term view of orchestrating a big war in Europe between Germany and the Soviet Union. And so now we see this again. All of a sudden, you know, if you look this in historical perspective, this is all happening exactly at the same moment that Britain, France, Germany, and then additionally Poland and the Baltic states are all gung-ho on remilitarizing the society, investing hundreds of billions of dollars into defense industries, boosting their militaries, introducing conscription, and basically preparing for war. How to explain that? That all three major powers plus Poland plus Baltic states are all suddenly very, very keenly interested in turning towards the militarization of the continent. It's there is some kind of a moving principle behind this, because what are we talking about? Let's take Germany. So in Germany, what Merz is doing is he's trying to remove constitutional brakes on debt, so to make an exemption for the defense industries, because you know the Russians are coming, of course, and if he's successful, that might trigger up to 1.7 trillion euros of new spending, which will have to be debt financed. That's a lot of money. It's more than 20,000 euros per man, woman, and child in Germany. So, if they can mobilize that amount of capital for defense spending, that means they could they could mobilize it for any other kind of spending, right? They could say, let's just give every man, woman, and child in Germany 20,000 euros. And then they'll spend it. So, you know, hotels will do well, restaurants will do well, people who make clothes will do well, computers will sell and devices, people will improve their houses, furniture will sell. You could stimulate economy in this way. You don't have to, it's not a given that you have to only do military spending, security, spy systems, surveillance technology. This is what they're intending to put all this money towards. Now, why do they don't choose? Why do they not choose that kind of spending, or you know, whatever, building cathedrals or pyramids? It's war, right? It's war. So there's obviously some moving principle that is above the government of Germany, above the government of France, above the government of Great Britain, which is making these decisions and these allocations. And then the politics falls into line, because of course, once you start spending that amount of money, you're going to create employment. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, politicians want to get onto this bandwagon and claim credit and see like, oh, look, we doubled the economic growth. The employment is rising again. People are feeling prosperous again. And this is all true. For one business cycle, it is going to seem that everybody is prosperous, but you have to repay those debts. So you know that at the end of that business cycle, things start going south again, and it's going to be a much, much bigger structural crisis. So, but anyway, the politicians will go along, the businesses will go along because, as we earlier this month, the CEO of Volkswagen said, "Oh, we welcome repurposing part of our production to military production because, of course, that will give them massive government defense procurement contracts. So, you can begin to reverse the company's slow decline." So shareholders, managers, they're all going to be happy about all this. And then in the end, you have the labor force. They're going to be happy because instead of ending up on the street, they're going to keep their jobs and they're going to get new jobs, and the wages are going to go up. So, but you see, all of these people, the politicians, the businesses, the labor, the ordinary people, they're incentivized. They're simply reacting to the incentive as it's given to them. The mover is someone else. It's not the politicians, not the businesses, not the people. So it's obviously coming from the banking circles. And we can see that today in Europe, more and more of these key positions in politics are being staffed by bankers. Who is Friedrich Merz, who just won the elections in Germany, probably rigged elections. Friedrich Merz used to be the chairman of BlackRock for Germany, chairman of the board, right? And then who is the acting finance minister of Germany? Jörg Kukies, who used to be practically a lifelong Goldman Sachs bankers, who also used to be in a key position at the European Stability Mechanism. This is another one of those things that people are barely aware that it exists. But what it is practically a permanent bailout fund for European banks, which is transferring money from the taxpayers to the banks in practically unlimited amounts as needed, without any oversight by any political institutions, democratic institutions of any European government. So it's basically a rule of the bankers and for the bankers and by the bankers. Then we have in France Emmanuel Macron, a Rothschild banker. Keir Starmer wasn't a banker, but he was a lawyer. And there's always this confluence of between finance and lawfare that is now defining the future development of our society. Again, we've seen this in the 1930s. We've also seen it in Ukraine after 2014. And we see where it leads. So I think that people in Europe have to be very much aware that this temporary prosperity, these jobs that they might have now because there's new credit impulse being unleashed for military spending, that in the end they might pay for this with the lives of their children. Because as somebody said recently, I forget exactly, they said first they took our savings, they already took our savings. Then they're going to take our pensions. And in the end, they're going to take our sons. Ukraine, Germany, how many millions died? Many millions. And they are now deliberately taking the whole of European society in that direction. And if people are confused about what this means, go back to 1961 and read Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address. That should be a wake-up call for everybody in Europe. And if we don't push back against this now, tomorrow it might be too late. You might get your child in a box with a flag draped over it, but it's going to be too late by then.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. God forbid.
No, I think we have to do more than hope.
Yeah.
I think we have to do more than hope.
We always do. Yeah. Alex, US is pushing more expensive minerals deal with Ukraine. Some sources say. Do you believe they will strike a deal? And if yes, in which form? I watched your interview with my friend Andy recently, where you said that the deal is already signed with the Brits. So I presume that the Americans will be only a part of this deal, or how do you view this?
Ah, well, yes, the deal was already signed by the Brits on 16th of January this year. It was called the 100-year partnership agreement between, Ukraine and the Kingdom of Britain and Northern Ireland. It's like a big sausage of a title, but you can look it up online under a British government website has the whole deal there, except that the agreement, it reads. It's not terribly controversial in that sense, but it refers to other addendums and schedules and appendices, whatever, that are not listed and that you cannot link to. But the government, when the agreement was signed, and Keir Starmer flew to Kiev, so that was 4 days before Donald Trump's inauguration. When it was signed, the British government also published a press release in which they said that this will make the Great Britain Ukraine's prime partner for the development of its resources and blah blah blah. I am convinced that the Americans are fully briefed and fully aware of this situation, and they're not going to agree to being second fiddle to the United Kingdom, or that the British will determine who gets what. So the British were saying, yeah, we're going to set up this fund from which you will receive future proceeds from development of these rare earth minerals. But they're planning the agenda, and I don't think that the Americans will accept this, because the Americans have to do all the dirty work and all the heavy lifting. The European powers have no chance of protecting Ukraine's government at this stage. So it's the Americans who have to provide security guarantee. If the government in Kiev realigns with Russia, then they will tear up these agreements, which means no minerals, no ports, no any kind of anything for the West. So if the United States doesn't remain in their role as the protector, as the guarantor of the continued government in Kiev that is aligned with the West, then all of these deals go to zero. They become nothing. And also, it's worth noting that when the deal with Britain was signed on 16th January, which means that Zelensky, who was the signatory, was a president of Ukraine unconstitutionally. His term expired. And it doesn't matter that the parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, subsequently voted a resolution under pressure from Britain to extend Zelensky's mandate. It cannot be extended. It's very precisely formulated in Ukrainian constitution under no circumstances. So Verkhovna Rada voted an unconstitutional resolution, which means that the Supreme Court will come and say this is null and void. So your agreement with Britain is null and void. The whole thing is. So it'll depend on who is in charge in Kiev. If the government realigns with Moscow, it all gets torn up. If it stays loyal to the West, then it can all stay as it is. But for that, the U.S. role is essential. And Keir Starmer said the U.S. backstop for this is essential. So Trump has a choice here. He can stay with this British deal and then get whatever they manage to finagle out of Zelensky as the British allow him to sign over. Or he can deal with Vladimir Putin and in that case, the security is a given. The Russians will take care of security. The Americans don't have to defend Ukrainian government. Trump made it very explicit that he trusts Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin said that they have a lot of resources. In fact, the bulk of Ukraine's resources are already under Russian control. So the upside for Trump is much, much greater in dealing with Russia. And the downside doesn't exist because there's no risk of, he doesn't have to dedicate military resources to defend Ukraine, doesn't have to deploy army, doesn't have to supply weapons, doesn't have to take the risk of maybe the whole thing escalating to World War III against Russia. And the upside is much bigger. So I think that the deal will be made, but it will be made with the Russians. And then, let's say that all these estimates that are floating around are accurate. We're talking about 10 to 12 trillion dollars worth of Ukraine's resources, but we're also talking 75 to 90 trillion dollars worth of Russian resources. And Putin said it that we have plenty of resources and we very much welcome foreign partners to join us in developing these resources, including the Americans. So the door's wide open, and the offer from the Russian is much, much more attractive and much less risky than what the British are trying to sell to the Americans. And now they're talking about making the United States part of the British Commonwealth, which is an innocuous name for the undead British Empire. And I don't think that's going to pass either. So anyway,
Yeah, do you see
long
any
story short, there's going to be a deal. It's going to be with the Russians.
Okay, do you see any Chinese influence here? I mean, do we actually know what's going on in the real terms? Are the cards on the table the real cards? Or this
You
is
have
just
to
a show for the masses?
you have to pay very close attention,
Read between
because
the lines.
yes, exactly. Well, some things are not even between the lines. They're set out in the open, but the media doesn't report it. They amplify some stories and they hush up other stories. For example, about 2 weeks ago, I was watching one of Trump's press conferences, and he was asked about China. And if you listen to the mainstream media, you would think that things with China are very tight, and there's a risk that things might escalate to some kind of a hot war confrontation. Well, Trump said, I have a very good relationship with Xi Jinping. And then they asked him, well, do you talk to him? And he kind of admitted that, yeah, I spoke with him. And we have a great relationship. He said that several times. And he said, did you notice I no longer call it a China virus? Yeah, he really doesn't call it a China virus anymore. But then in that answer, the last thing he said almost under his breath, he said, I speak with him a lot, meaning Xi Jinping. So he's saying he's speaking with Xi Jinping a lot. That's very important. And so we see that he's speaking with the Russians, he's speaking with the Chinese. I think there's going to be many, many deals made. But, Trump has domestic constituency at home. He's made many, many of them enemies. The big pharma, the military industrial complex, he said that he wants to cut military spending by half. That's going to make him a lot of enemies. He's made a lot of enemies in the deep state structures, in many of these government agencies that he plans to either cut down or reallocate their portfolios to other government agencies. So they have to tread very, very carefully. I think that with time, will know more about deals, and I think that they're going to ultimately be good for the United States. They're going to be good for Russia. They're going to be good for China. There's going to be sharing of resources, and I think in the end there's going to be a more open sharing of technologies as well. Uh, but this will have to be developed slowly and gradually. And then Europe, Europe is going to have to find its way. You know, we have this phenomenal innovation with the bottle caps that don't come off when you open them. We need to spread this to the world. You know, we need to develop markets for this because people just don't understand these phenomenal innovations and improvement that we have here in Europe. But you know, hopefully with time we'll be able to market those more effectively.
Yeah. Alex, in every war we have winners, we have losers. We have trading war as we speak. So who will be the biggest winner? I mean, not just trading war. From this, who will be the biggest winner from this geopolitical mass trading wars? And actually, will there be a winner?
At the moment, it seems to me that the big winner is Russia.
That's in the short term. What about long term?
Uh, I think again Russia, but also China, United States, Iran, and generally global South. You know, we have to let's let's step away from the day-to-day events and all the ugly things that are going on today. There's a Confucian saying that says, when a large tree falls, it falls with great noise and destruction, but seeds grow without a sound. So, you know, everything that we're observing in the world today, and which is kind of mesmerizing us, we're almost hypnotized with, like, oh my God, war here, war there, conflict there, this could escalate, this could fall apart. We're watching at the old structures of society falling apart, and then they're falling with great noise and destruction. And it's, you know, it's causing fear and anxiety among people. But at the same time, if you pay attention, you will notice all these seeds growing. And then seeds grow everywhere without noise, but you can see them. Like, for example, today, the world is opening up like never ever before. You know, we have these insane platforms where we get to meet across the world, where we get to learn about one another, and this is happening every day. Where we get to promote our goods and services globally. Just to give you an example, yesterday I watched a video which goes on for about an hour about Japanese crafts. You know, like when you break a piece of porcelain, then you can put it together with gold. So it's broken, but it's pretty. It's now a unique thing. So that's kind of nice to watch, relaxing, you know. And then about making of tin cups. And so this 1 hour video has about 4 or 5 craftsmen showing how they make something. And it's all traditional crafts that are, you know, quite nice, you know, that these crafts are being retained. And why am I saying this to you? Because this video is actually a marketing video. Because it says you can get tutorials on how to do this, and we'll send you packages with all the materials. Click here, and then you get to buy it. And the payment systems that exist, that you can pay somebody in Japan that, you know, an hour ago you didn't even know that they existed, yeah, to send you the tutorial about how to do something and send you their material. Well, you know, this is providing solutions, alternatives, meaning business, revenue for these craftsmen, and there is no limit there. So if you have something to say, if you know how to do something, if you can provide a service, if you have a product that you can sell, the whole world is opening to you.
Yeah.
So you get to be one of those seeds, and there's no telling how you grow. This is all happening at the very same time as all these old structures are imploding on themselves. And this is what we get in the media. This is what is generating the stories.
Yeah.
So we're all focused on that. But the seeds are growing, and you'll notice them if you pay half attention to this. You'll notice them everywhere. So long term, the winners is potentially all of us. Humanity is the winner long term if we manage to defend and preserve peace. And we have to know that we have very powerful enemies in this sense, and we have to wise up to their agendas, to their means and method, and then we have to push back, let the old unsustainable, obsolete structures of society collapse, and let the new seeds grow. It's an organic process practically, but I expect that it's a good process, because everything that grows organically in nature ends up creating something good and beautiful.
Agreed. In our last interview, you said you believe that the European Union, Japan, and Great Britain will have progressive collapse of their currencies. Does that mean that betting on safe haven currency like Swiss franc is a good long-term bet? Or even the US dollar, which also performed well during the financial crisis in 2008. Actually, is there a good bet in a paper money?
Let's say that in general, yes, that makes good sense. US dollar will remain, even though, there is this process of de-dollarization, but realistically, there's a certain inertia to that. People worldwide still understand what a US dollar is. It makes it easy to price goods. Everybody understands what $75 a barrel means. If somebody said like, no, from now on we're going to do special drawing rights. So somebody tells you a barrel of oil costs so many special drawing rights. It's, so there's a little bit of inertia in that. So dollar is going to remain to a large extent relevant. And, given that the United States is a sovereign nation with its own sovereign monetary and economic policy, it's always going to be preferable to a scotched up patchwork of nations with one central bank but many issuing banks like Europe and their currency. So I think that euro is going to be one of the first things to collapse. Swiss franc is a legitimate alternative. Then we can also talk about currencies of commodity countries, meaning countries that are commodity exporters. Okay, so I'm not talking about Venezuela necessarily, but I am talking about countries like Russia, Norway, Canada, Australia. Their currencies might be a bit more robust and less fragile than currencies of places like Japan, Europe, Great Britain. And then, are we still talking about just paper?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would round it up. But you have to always be ready for surprises, because there's a possibility that in the United States, Donald Trump, his administration is going to introduce a dual currency system, meaning that there's going to be a dollar for foreign trade, and there's going to be a dollar for domestic use. And then that means that it's basically the Chinese model, and it makes a lot of sense, because by using the dual currency system, China has been able to insulate itself from external shocks. So the last 40 years, China has not had, maybe longer than 40 years, I don't know, but China, in my memory, has never had a financial crisis, whereas we in the West have a financial crisis every few years. So it would make a lot of sense for Trump administration to introduce a dual currency system, which, if they do, for sure, it'll be an ambush. They're not going to announce it for everybody to adjust their positions. They're just going to ambush the markets with that, which means that whatever you thought about how much sense it makes to hold dollars or not hold dollars or Swiss franc, it's all subject to surprises that we cannot expect today. So I think that you want to be diversified. You want to be in gold. You want to be in commodities, silver, Bitcoin perhaps, and so that whenever some big shock happens in some market, some security, that it only has limited impact on your own savings.
Yeah, well, you mentioned gold. Gold is at all-time high, $3,100. Is this gold price telling us that the world is already in chaos?
Well, as if we needed more evidence of that. But it is telling us perhaps that the monetary authorities are beginning to lose control. Because they've been telling us for decades that gold is irrelevant, that it's a barbarous relic. Nobody needs gold. It doesn't generate any returns. It's not a productive thing. It's just a stupid thing you dig up from the ground to store it back underground again. Things like this. And so this has been relatively effective. So people have not been interested in gold. So until about, let's say, 12, 14 months ago, gold has really languished. It hasn't done a thing. But now, since the beginning of 2024, the trend has begun. Where the trend goes, we don't know. Now it reached new all-time highs, but that doesn't mean that this is as high as it goes. Because what I've observed, and I've been, following the market for 25 years now, closely. It's my day job. I've seen that since about 2016 onwards, we've had very often these vertical hockey stick progressions in one market after another. So you had cobalt in 2016, I think. Then you had palladium, 2018, 2019, 2020. Things like Bitcoin, Tesla, Nvidia, many different things. And I thought that the reason this might be happening is because there's been a huge amount of liquidity that has been pumped into the markets since 2008. And you have now, as a result, this ginormous shadow banking system, which is 220 trillion US dollars. And so this is, pension funds, hedge funds, insurance companies, endowments, and so on. So these are liquid investable assets that are seeking return. And when some security starts to move, it's enough for just a small number of these money managers to say, oh, maybe I want to have more exposure to this thing, whatever it be. They end up moving massive amounts of liquidity. So we're talking more than $200 trillion in liquid investable assets versus what's gold? About 10 trillion, let's say between 10 and 20 trillion. So it's relatively small. And I think that the tradable part, that the stuff that you can buy and sell relatively easily, I think that's about 2 trillion. So this is how, if just a small number of money managers say like, oh, I need to increase my allocation to gold, it can put rocket fuel underneath the price. So we have no idea what might happen. And uh, I read recently an analysis paper that said that uh, the average fund has about 1% allocation to gold. 1%. And many of them have none, zero at all, nothing at all. And so if they all start to moving, we're going to have continued upward pressure on the price of gold. And then you can expect that at the very least in sympathy, silver is going to follow, and other precious, semi-precious metals like platinum and palladium. And then we've also had this week copper price make new all-time highs.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason is that there's a inflation pressure, inflation hedging demand for copper. But we have to not forget also that all these hundreds of billions of dollars that the Europeans are now plowing into defense industries is going to put upward pressure on all metals and energy. So that brings us then to the commodities supercycle scenario, which has been widely discussed and anticipated over the past few years. And the commodity supercycle is something that's going to span the next 10 to 25 years. So we might see prices of these things move not by 20, 50%, 100%, but several fold. It's an inflationary process. And last time we had strong inflation in the 1970s, the price of gold went up 24 times, not 24%, not 100%, 24-fold. And the price of silver went up 50-fold. So, we might be at the foot of those developments.
Yeah, you agreed on that. Unfortunately, with commodity super cycle and commodity demand, sometimes wars come as well. So we will see what happens, definitely.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, my final question to you, Alex, how do you see, you can answer it in 2 minutes. How do you see the future of global order, let's say in 10, 15 years from now? Will we have to pay our lunch with a silver bar, with a silver coin or a gold coin, or not?
No, we're probably going to be using mostly electronic money.
Okay.
But we have to, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against electronic money because it's really convenient, it's really handy, provided that we're not locked into it. So provided that we have alternatives.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to have dual or multiple currency systems, that we're mostly going to be using electronic money for everyday transactions, but we might be using other things for savings and for large item purchases. We have to keep exerting pressure on the political system to drive these developments towards greater liberty, because it can amount to greater liberty rather than being locked into some kind of a digital matrix with programming central bank digital currencies controlled by one single power structure that is antithetical to human liberty and to prosperity. The people who say you will own nothing and you will be happy, those people. We see that the European Central Bank is now gung-ho on digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. Central bank digital currency, as proposed by the EU, will fail, no doubt about that. But, part of the reason for that is because it also demands almost hermetic control of society. So this is why also in parallel they're pushing this digital ID. Well, even that doesn't help them unless that digital ID is under your skin.
Yeah.
Because, if you have a very restrictive monetary policy and you're locked into one kind of money, then what people do is they start to create gray and black markets, and then more and more and more of the economic activity starts to spill over into the gray and black markets, over which governments have no control, and they collect zero taxes from that. So the way to prevent this, because they understand this, if you go to countries like Argentina, Venezuela, practically half the GDP is on black markets. You can find anything there, anything at all. And it becomes a big magnet for consumers, and it becomes a big magnet for entrepreneurs, because there's no taxes, there's no government red tape. You get to do whatever you want, right? So it's great. So if a significant percentage of transactions in an economy start to go gray and black, the governments lose control. They cannot police that. They can try to discourage people in the very beginnings if it's only on the margins. If it's just some marginal transactions. But if it becomes a whole percentage of your GDP, you lost control. And you cannot get it back, which is why, it's not like in Argentina and Venezuela and many other countries, governments like to have gray markets. It's that they don't know what to do about it. It's not very easy to put back, because now you have to compete. You have to be competitive with the black markets to get people back into the legal market. Well, basically, if this is their means of control, you can leave this back home and go do your transactions with whatever means of exchange, whatever money is going to be accepted, and they have no control over that. But if they put a chip under your skin, you cannot leave it at home. And this is what they want to do. So we have to insist on having alternative means of payment. So don't patronize businesses that only take electronic money. And never, ever, under any circumstances, accept an electronic tag under your skin, because then you're cooked. And I expect that we will be able to avoid these dangers, and then come out winners, as we came out with the pandemic, because that was a hugely bruising experience, but in the end they failed. And so they will fail with this one as well. And in the end, we're going to come to a greater life of liberty, prosperity, and peace.
Yeah, that was Alex Krainer. Alex, thank you for coming to my show. Great chat as always, and I look forward to host you again.
Thank you very much, Lucian, and greetings to everybody out there. Stay free and have a great weekend. It's Friday today, TGIF.